Hello everyone, and welcome to my Bold and Beautiful for You channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. It all began with a moment so chilling that no one could forget it, yet so subtle that it had passed almost unnoticed at first. Luna, the vibrant, independent, and determined woman who had captured everyone's hearts, had supposedly died under circumstances that seemed both tragic and suspicious. The news had spread like wildfire across Los Angeles and beyond. Luna was gone, taken by the sea in what appeared to be a horrifying accident orchestrated by none other than Elektra, whose motives had always teetered between obsession and chaos. Everyone, from Liam, her devoted love, to her closest friends, had mourned her loss. But as the days stretched into weeks, a gnawing unease began to take root among those who had loved her. Something about her death had never felt right. It was on an ordinary morning, one seemingly like any other, that the truth began to emerge, not through an elaborate confession, but in the most devastatingly simple way, 5 words spoken in the wrong, or perhaps right, moment, depending on how you looked at it. Elektra, standing in the midst of a tense confrontation with Hope, Steffi, and even Bill, let slip the words that would upend everything: "She never truly left us." The sentence, brief and almost casual, struck with the force of a thunderclap. Time seemed to stop. Faces frozen in shock, breaths caught midair, hearts skipping in disbelief. Everyone present felt it in their core: they had been living a lie. Luna hadn't died. Not really. Not in the way they'd been led to believe. For Liam, the revelation was almost too much to bear. Memories of her eyes, the warmth of her hands, the quiet moments that had meant everything, the laughter they had shared, the promises they had made, came flooding back. And alongside that came anger, a burning, consuming fury directed not at Elektra alone, but at everyone who had allowed this deception to fester. Bill, once trusted implicitly, had been entangled in the conspiracy, whether through ignorance or willful blindness. Steffi and Hope had their own secrets, moments where they could have intervened, could have prevented the heartbreak, but hadn't. Each betrayal was a knife twisting deeper into Liam's already wounded heart. The story of Luna's supposed demise was far more convoluted than anyone could have imagined. Elektra had been the instrument of the chaos, yes, but she was not the mastermind. Behind her actions lay a web of manipulation, carefully orchestrated by those who feared what Luna represented: truth, integrity, and a kind of love that refused to bend to the selfish ambitions of the powerful. It turned out that Luna had survived the initial attack, pulled from the water and hidden away by someone whose motives were complex, compassionate, and ultimately protective. She had endured the isolation with quiet strength, recovering in secrecy while the world mourned her. As the news spread beyond the immediate circle, the public reaction was just as intense as the private turmoil. Social media erupted, fans of the bold and the beautiful expressing shock, relief, and outrage in equal measure. Conspiracy theories flourished. Why had Luna been hidden? Who could be trusted? What had Elektra truly meant? Each revelation seemed to raise more questions than answers, and yet the undeniable truth could no longer be ignored: Luna had been alive, all along. Liam's journey to reunite with her was fraught with obstacles. There were logistical challenges, emotional barriers, and the pervasive sense of guilt that came from feeling both betrayed and helpless. Every encounter with someone who had lied or kept secrets became a test of his patience and his understanding of the human heart. There were confrontations that escalated into shouting matches, quiet moments of introspection where he wrestled with forgiveness, and instances where grief threatened to consume him all over again. Yet through it all, the thought of Luna, her survival, her resilience, served as a beacon guiding him forward. Elektra, meanwhile, became an even more complex figure than she had ever been portrayed. The 5 words she uttered, though brief, revealed layers of her personality that no one had fully understood. On one hand, she had been reckless, impulsive, and selfish in the past. But in that moment, she was the bearer of truth, a reluctant herald of the revelation that would shake the foundations of everyone's relationships. Her role in the saga was no longer one-dimensional. She became a catalyst, a symbol of the delicate balance between chaos and clarity, destruction and redemption. The reunions were nothing short of cinematic in their intensity. Liam's first encounter with Luna after her hidden months of survival was electric. Words failed them, there was only the raw, visceral recognition of life and love restored. Every embrace, every tear, every trembling voice spoke volumes more than any confession ever could. And yet, beneath the euphoria, there remained a shadow of anger and sorrow, a shared understanding that too much time had been lost to lies and secrecy. Meanwhile, the fallout from Luna's return reverberated across all of Los Angeles. Friends and foes alike were forced to confront their roles in her disappearance and the lies they had perpetuated. Steffi and Hope had to reckon with their inaction, Bill had to face the consequences of his manipulation, Ridge had to confront the tangled web of family, loyalty, and ambition that had created the perfect storm. Each character's journey became interwoven with Luna's survival, testing the limits of trust, loyalty, and forgiveness. As the narrative unfolded, it became clear that Luna's survival was more than a mere plot twist, it was a transformative moment, one that redefined every relationship and power dynamic in play. The betrayal that had cut so deeply now had to be reconciled with the reality of survival and hope. Elektra, despite her past misdeeds, found herself in a strange position of redemption. Those she had hurt were forced to confront the complexity of morality, truth, and consequence. And Luna herself, ever strong, ever resilient, emerged as a beacon of perseverance, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, the human spirit could endure and thrive. The story did not end with Luna's return. It expanded, evolved, and rippled outward, touching every corner of the characters' lives. There were confrontations yet to come, alliances to be tested, and secrets that would continue to surface as each person tried to navigate the aftermath. But through it all, the one truth that remained unshakable was that Luna had never truly died. And in that truth lay the promise of redemption, reconciliation, and the enduring power of love, even when shadowed by betrayal. By the time the dust settled, everyone had been changed irrevocably. Liam and Luna, now reunited, faced the future with cautious hope, their bond strengthened by adversity. Friends and rivals alike had been forced to re-evaluate their priorities, question their loyalties, and acknowledge the human capacity for both error and forgiveness. And Elektra, with her 5 words that had shattered the illusion of death, became the unlikely fulcrum of a story that reminded everyone watching why they had fallen in love with the drama, intensity, and humanity of the bold and the beautiful in the first place. In the end, the saga of Luna's survival was more than a dramatic twist, it was a testament to the resilience of the human heart, the fragility of trust. The revelation of Luna's survival sent shockwaves through every corner of her world, shaking foundations that had seemed unshakable. Liam couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't focus on anything other than the knowledge that the woman he had loved, mourned, and even started to imagine life without, had been alive all along. His mind replayed the moments before her supposed death with painful clarity, the desperation in her eyes, the way Elektra had cornered her, the struggle, the fear, the water swallowing her whole. How could he have been so blind? How could everyone have been so blind? And yet, there she was, breathing, whole, more alive than ever, and yet undeniably changed by the months of secrecy and trauma she had endured. For Luna, the experience had left scars that went deeper than anyone could see. Surviving Elektra's attack and the months of isolation had strengthened her in ways that were frightening even to herself. She had learned to rely solely on her instincts, to trust no one blindly, and to value every small moment of freedom and safety. Yet her heart ached for the friends and family who had mourned her, who had cried in despair, who had feared she was gone forever. And though she had returned, the reunion was not simple or easy. Each interaction was charged with the weight of betrayal, the hidden manipulations, the secrets kept, the lies told. Her voice, calm but resolute, carried the authority of someone who had faced death and survived, and yet underneath, there was a fragile vulnerability that she struggled to conceal. Elektra, too, found herself in a paradoxical position. The 5 words she had spoken, simple, devastating, revelatory, had altered the course of everyone's lives, and yet she was haunted by them. She had never intended for the truth to be so explosive, for the consequences to spiral in the way they did. She had been reckless, impulsive, selfish, yes, but in that moment, she became a key player in a story larger than her own ambitions. The guilt was there, undeniable and suffocating, and yet she could not undo what had been set in motion. All she could do was stand, watch, and brace herself for the backlash that was certain to come. Meanwhile, the others, Bill, Steffi, Hope, Ridge, were all forced to confront their own culpability. Bill, whose thirst for control and manipulation had often blinded him to morality, now faced the consequences of his choices. Every secret kept, every decision made in the shadow of ambition, every instance where he had placed his desires above others' safety, came rushing back to him like a flood of regret. Steffi and Hope, who had lived under the illusion that their inaction was inconsequential, realized too late the devastating impact of their silence. Each moment of hesitation, each decision to look away, each compromise made in the name of self-preservation now seemed unbearably heavy. The bonds of friendship, trust, and family were tested like never before, and each character's moral compass spun wildly in the aftermath of Luna's return. The reunions, when they came, were nothing short of electric. Liam's first embrace of Luna was suffused with every emotion he had suppressed over the months: relief, love, guilt, anger, longing. Words failed them, as they so often do in moments of deep, unspoken emotion. Every glance, every tremor of a hand, every breath shared between them told a story far more powerful than dialogue ever could. They clung to each other as if to make up for lost time, yet beneath the joy was an undercurrent of sorrow. Months had passed, and lives had changed. They were not the same people who had last stood together on that fateful day by the water. But that only made their bond more profound, more urgent, and more impossible to ignore. Luna's reintegration into the world was complicated and fraught with tension. Those who had mourned her had to confront their grief, their misplaced blame, and the reality that the world they had known had been built on deception. Public opinion was electric. Fans, the media, even casual observers were transfixed by the scandalous revelation. Social media exploded with speculation: who had hidden her, and why? Could Electra truly be trusted as the bearer of truth, or was this another layer of manipulation? And what of the family and friends who had unknowingly contributed to her suffering? Each question brought waves of introspection, confrontation, and uneasy reconciliation. Bill, always a master of strategy, struggled to recalibrate. His plans, his control, his vision for his family and empire, all had to be re-examined in the light of Luna's return. The revelation destabilized every power structure he had carefully constructed. In a way, he felt the sting of his own hubris, the arrogance that had led him to believe he could orchestrate life and death, love and loss, without consequence. And now, the consequences were unavoidable. He faced not only the wrath of those he had deceived, but also the reality of his own failings, something that even a man as powerful as Bill rarely experienced fully. For Steffi and Hope, Luna's survival became a mirror reflecting their own limitations and failures. The moments where they could have acted, the choices they had avoided, and the judgments they had made, all were laid bare. They had to navigate a treacherous emotional landscape, balancing relief at Luna's safety with guilt over their complicity in the silence that had allowed her suffering to continue. Their friendships, alliances, and even romantic entanglements were tested in ways they could never have anticipated. The drama, tension, and stakes were elevated exponentially, making every interaction charged, every decision potentially catastrophic. Luna herself faced the most profound challenges. Beyond the reunion with Liam and the joy of survival, she had to confront the reality of what had been done to her, the betrayal, the abandonment, the lies, and decide how to move forward. Could she forgive? Could she rebuild trust with those who had failed her? Could she reclaim her life in a world that had moved on in her absence? Each step was a test of resilience, courage, and self-awareness. Every encounter, whether with family, friends, or foes, became a battlefield for both emotion and principle. Electra's role remained paradoxical, hovering between antagonist and reluctant savior. Her impulsive actions had catalyzed the revelation, yet they had also caused immeasurable suffering. She navigated a world now intensely scrutinizing her every word, every motive, every decision. And in that scrutiny, there was a strange liberation, the ability to no longer hide behind secrecy, to face the consequences of actions, and perhaps, to find a path toward redemption. As the weeks progressed, the ripples of Luna's survival spread further than anyone anticipated. Relationships fractured and healed, alliances shifted, and truths that had been buried in secrecy surfaced one by one. Each character had to navigate the treacherous waters of conscience, morality, and desire, making decisions that would reverberate for months, if not years. The past, long thought settled, was suddenly alive, tangible, and impossible to ignore. And through it all, Luna remained a constant, quiet force, strong, resilient, and unwavering. She was a living testament to endurance, survival, and the unbreakable spirit of someone who had faced death and emerged. The days following Luna's revelation were a whirlwind of confrontation, confession, and chaos. Liam moved like a man possessed, driven by the need to make sense of the months he had lost. Every encounter with Electra, Bill, Steffi, Hope, Ridge, and even minor players in the Forrester world felt charged, electric with suppressed anger and the raw weight of betrayal. Liam's mind raced constantly, replaying the 5 words Electra had spoken: "She never truly left us." Those words had cracked the illusion of reality he had clung to since Luna's disappearance, and now, there was no returning to ignorance. He demanded answers, each one more agonizing than the last, and each revelation seemed to twist the knife of betrayal just a little deeper. Electra, for her part, was a storm of contradictions. She had always thrived on chaos, but now, in the wake of her own confession, she felt an unfamiliar weight, guilt. Each gaze directed at her carried the sting of resentment and mistrust, and she found herself unexpectedly isolated, despite having catalyzed the greatest revelation of the season. And yet, even as she endured anger, accusations, and the pointed stares of those who had loved Luna, there was a strange liberation in speaking the truth. It was as if, in those 5 words, Electra had shattered not just the lies, but the fragile walls around herself as well. Luna herself faced an entirely different battle. Survival had given her physical strength, but the emotional scars ran deep. To see Liam, her love, tearfully confronting everyone over the months of deception was both comforting and terrifying. Every touch, every glance, every whispered "I thought I lost you" brought relief, but also reminded her of the isolation she had endured. She had been hidden, protected, and yet imprisoned by those who feared what her presence might do to their plans. Reconnecting with a world that had moved on without her was overwhelming. She struggled to reconcile her joy at being alive with the deep sense of betrayal she felt toward the people she once trusted implicitly. Steffi and Hope became almost secondary characters in Liam and Luna's immediate reunion, yet their roles were crucial in the unfolding storm. They had to navigate the delicate tension between relief and guilt, knowing that their silence, inaction, or misguided decisions had contributed to months of suffering. Steffi, ever proud and often uncompromising, found herself in moments of profound humility, forced to admit she had underestimated the consequences of her choices. Hope, usually the moral compass of the family, grappled with the sting of her own limitations, the realization that even the best intentions could lead to devastation when combined with human error and secrecy. Each confrontation with Luna and Liam was fraught with unspoken tension, apologies left unsaid, and a simmering need for redemption that would take weeks, if not months, to untangle. Bill's reaction was a complex mixture of strategic calculation, fear, and genuine remorse. The revelation of Luna's survival had not only destabilized the emotional landscape of those around him but had also disrupted his carefully constructed web of power and influence. His empire, built on manipulation, secrecy, and control, suddenly seemed fragile, vulnerable to exposure. He faced a moral reckoning that was unfamiliar and uncomfortable. Even his formidable composure faltered under the weight of scrutiny and the knowledge that his decisions had directly contributed to months of pain and deception. Bill had always been a man used to orchestrating outcomes, but now, the truth had slipped from his control, leaving him raw, exposed, and uncertain. The media frenzy that followed Luna's return added another layer of complexity. Paparazzi, online theorists, and fans obsessed with the drama of her survival bombarded everyone with questions, speculation, and unrelenting scrutiny. Every detail of Luna's disappearance, her hidden months, and the tangled web of deception was dissected publicly. Social media erupted with theories, accusations, and praise. Luna, who had once been a figure of gentle strength, became a symbol of resilience, survival, and the triumph of truth over deceit. But the public spotlight also amplified the emotional stakes, forcing every character to confront their actions in ways that felt both immediate and inescapable. As the weeks unfolded, the emotional complexity deepened. Liam struggled to balance relief, love, and anger, while Luna worked to reconcile the trauma of her isolation with the demands of reintegrating into a world that had mourned her death. Electra, once an agent of chaos, navigated the thin line between redemption and judgment. Bill, Steffi, and Hope wrestled with guilt, responsibility, and the limits of forgiveness. Ridge, often a voice of reason, found himself caught between protecting his family, managing the fallout, and maintaining his own moral integrity. The interplay of these emotional threads created a tense, almost unbearable suspense that threatened to consume every interaction, every conversation, every moment of connection. Even the smallest moments were laden with meaning. A glance across a crowded room, a whispered apology, a trembling hand extended in forgiveness, all carried the weight of months of secrecy, fear, and suppressed emotion. The tension was palpable, unrelenting, and yet undeniably compelling. Each character was forced to confront not just the reality of Luna's survival, but the implications for their own lives, choices, and morality. The story had shifted from tragedy to revelation, from loss to survival, and with it came the opportunity for redemption, reconciliation, and a re-evaluation of what truly mattered. Luna's own growth became the emotional fulcrum of the saga. Her resilience inspired those around her, even as her anger, sorrow, and disappointment reminded them of the cost of their actions. She had endured isolation, betrayal, and fear, yet she emerged with a quiet strength that demanded acknowledgement, respect, and care. Her presence challenged the characters to be better, to act with integrity, and to confront the consequences of their decisions in ways they had previously avoided. And through it all, the tension never fully dissipated. Every interaction, every decision, and every revelation continued to carry the weight of Luna's survival. The story was far from over. The threads of betrayal, forgiveness, love, and power were only beginning to weave themselves into the next chapter. Luna's survival was not an ending, it was a catalyst, a force that would drive the drama forward in unexpected, unpredictable, and profoundly emotional ways. The stage was set for confrontations yet to come. Families would be tested, friendships strained, and alliances questioned. The consequences of months of deception could no longer be ignored, and every character would be forced to face the truth of their actions. The fallout from Luna's return promised to be explosive, revealing hidden motives, buried secrets, and the deep complexity of human emotion. And amidst it all, Luna remained the constant, a survivor, a fighter, and the embodiment of truth. Her journey reminded everyone that even in the darkest, most isolating moments, resilience, courage, and the power of love could prevail. She was the heart of the storm, the eye of the hurricane, and the beacon guiding everyone toward reconciliation, understanding, and the ultimate revelation that even betrayal, loss, and secrecy could not extinguish the light of life.